Hello, my loves. I've read 16 things since we have spoken, so we have May and June to get through. Let's get into it. First up is The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the finale to the Indian Lake trilogy. My Heart is a Chainsaw is one of my favorite books of all time, and I really loved the way that this third book in the trilogy really wrapped up the whole entire story. I absolutely loved it. I think the second one was my least favorite out of the three. My Heart is a Chainsaw was first, then the third one, and then the second one. I'm not gonna say all too much more than that because I don't want to spoil the first two books, but if you haven't picked up this trilogy and you're a fan of slashers, you seriously need to. Our main character is this girl who is obsessed with slashers, and when this new girl moves into her neighborhood, she is convinced that she's a final girl and that a slasher cycle is about to start. We kind of follow her on this journey that gets wild and bloody. I really love the way that this third book wrapped everything up, and I really highly recommend you read it. I gave this last one a 4.75. Then I read The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I got this as an advanced copy from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley for that. I didn't love this. I gave it 3.5, so I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite thing that I've ever read. I really love a book that starts with the ending. I think Catherine Steadman does this really well, and The Midnight Feast does that, where we start with finding out that this huge manor has been burned down. There's a fire that has happened, and that's in chapter 1, and then we kind of backtrack and see like how we got to that point. I like the structure of it. There's this really beautiful sense of this gothic foreboding. We are in this small town. We're seeing this woman opening this huge manor hotel situation, and there's a lot of really rich people there, and there's a really clear class divide between the local people and the tourists who are coming to visit. Unfortunately, the book just kind of dragged for me. I felt like all the action was saved for the last 20%, and it wasn't my favorite reading experience. I prefer when a thriller has things that are like paced out, reveals that are paced out through the whole thing. This one, there was this really gradual sense of buildup, and then it got really crazy at the end, and I prefer, if it's gonna get crazy, to have more craziness all the way through. Then I read The Ministry of Time. This was a disappointment. I gave this 2.5 stars. I'm trying to be more regressive about things when I don't like them. I've been here for 3 years now. I know what I like, I know what I don't like. I didn't like this. It's marketed as a romance, and I think it kind of ruined my expectations of this book. Not to say that I think it shouldn't be marketed as a romance or that different marketing would have made me enjoy it more. I really went into this thinking that I was gonna get a happy, fun rom-com situation where we were gonna have this guy from 1847 who was going to come into our present day and fall in love with this woman who's been assigned to like help acclimate him to present day in like a caretaker sort of a way. I thought that was gonna be their relationship. I thought that it was gonna be quirky and fun. He was gonna like not know things, but they were still gonna bond over things that are timeless. And that's not really what I got. I got like a pretty heavily government focused, militarized time travel story. I really didn't believe in the romance in here. I thought they would have been better off as friends. It just felt like a lot of different genres smushed together. It felt a little disjointed. I would read from this author again in the future. I think the writing quality was fine, but I don't think that the plot structure was what it needed to be. But this is a debut, so I would like to see what this author does next. And if they do something that sounds like it would be up my alley, I would be willing to give them another go. But the back says, a boy meets girl, the past meets the future, a finger meets a trigger, the beginning meets the end, which makes me just think that this is gonna be something that it's not, and I didn't really love it. Then I read Mixed Signals. We had a couple of flops with romance. I have read Love Light Farms from this author before, okay? I did like Love Light Farms a lot. This one, unfortunately, was too steamy for me. I really liked the relationship, I liked the plot, I liked the romance. I think this book has really solidified for me that I prefer like a T. Kingfisher or an Emily Henry type romance, or even a closed door romance where it's fade to black. This is a bit too much for me, but if that's what you're looking for, I did enjoy the rest of this. If you've read Love Light Farms, we're back in the same situation. This is the third book this series. I skipped right over the second one because I tried to read it and it was way too many sex scenes for me and I just couldn't do it. Maybe that should have been my signal that I wasn't gonna enjoy this one either, but I tried it and I didn't like it. Anyways, you get to see characters from before. All of our main characters are like working on this farm in some capacity. So our main character here is the baker on the farm, and there's this guy who basically like saves her from this really bad date. She's been going on a lot of really awful dates, and and he basically like, let me take you out, we'll fake date, I'll show you what this is supposed to feel like so that you can restore your faith in men. And he also has a crush on her and like wants to date her, but he's also worried because he feels like none of his relationships ever go past like the 4th date, and he wants to know like what he's doing wrong. They end up falling in love. It's a romance. It was just way too spicy for me. I gave it 3 stars though. Then I read The History of Mr. Polly, and oh boy, it was 2 stars. I did not like it. I read it in this video where I tried to find the cure for failure, which may have been a little bit too ambitious because I did not like The History of Mr. Polly by H.G. Wells. I've read other H.G. Wells that I liked before, but this one was just not it. The moral implications of a man who hates his life so much that he wants to end his life, basically doesn't make any decisions, lets life happen to him, ends up with a job that he doesn't like and a marriage that he doesn't want, sets his life on fire, figuratively and literally, goes and starts over in a new town and just gives up on all of his responsibilities. It works out for him in a way, but it was just a weird little book and I didn't like it. What I did like was The Haunting of Belwood. I gave this 5 stars. This is the perfect little ghost story. We are following our main character as she returns to her hometown, this street that is in its own little ghost world. So one day, everyone on this street just became ghosts and they're stuck in this time loop. No one can get in, no one can come out except for these 3 people who were there the night that it happened. There's these researchers, everyone's trying to figure out this paranormal situation. And these 3 girls also have really complicated relationships and feelings towards each other. And there's obviously something that went down the night that this happened. So we're trying to uncover that as well and understand why these ghosts are here. We do actually get a lot of explanation about what happened, but not, I guess, how it happened. We get the what and the why, we don't get the how, which is kind of like my favorite ghost story to follow. I loved the relationships between these girls as well, these really complicated friendships and maybe more than friendships, and that feeling of wanting to escape your hometown for a lot of reasons and then also being pulled back because you feel like you have responsibilities. I just thought this was exceptionally well done. The writing in here is incredible, and it is one of my favorite ghost stories that I have ever read. Continuing on with 5 stars, if you watched my mid-year freakout tag, you'll know that I loved Lightfall. This was absolutely incredible. This is the 2nd book in this series, and we are following a girl and a Galdurian. The art style is absolutely lovely. I think that this author has a real skill for telling the stories that I wish I had growing up. It's magical, it's interesting. The plot is fast-paced, but still has time for these sentimental moments. It's funny, it's dark, talks about being anxious about things, also talks about this desire to do the right thing. I feel like this book especially, and the 3rd one, is showing us how to really strive and try to do the right thing, and then also what happens if while you're trying to do that, you end up making mistakes and you do the bad thing and you do the wrong thing, how to take responsibility for that and rectify those mistakes. And I feel like that's something that I maybe haven't seen in a lot of children's literature before. I just really had a great time with this book. Then I read Snapdragon, another little graphic novel. This one is sweet and cute and gets a little bit magical. We're following our main character. She's looking for her dog who got lost. She ends up going to this witch who's in the woods, and she's found her dog, she's taking care of it, and she's really into taxidermy, and she starts learning about all of this. It gets speculative and witchy and cool, and we're just uncovering all of this past because this woman ends up having a connection to our main character. There's some queer representation in here, there's some trans representation in here. It's just a really fantastic little graphic novel. Snapdragon, I gave 4 stars, by the way. Then I read I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons by Peter S. Beagle. I gave this 3.75 stars. It was an enjoyable cozy fantasy. It was maybe a little bit more high stakes than I was expecting from a cozy fantasy. There are bad people doing bad things. The premise of this is that we have our main character who's a dragon exterminator. Dragons are like pests in this time, and he really hates killing them. Like he hates it. He hates his job. He has to kill a lot of them. There's a lot of dragon death in here. If you don't want to read a story about someone who has to kill a lot of things that he doesn't want to kill, this is probably not the book for you. That part of it does end at some point in the book, but it is like a major plot point that he feels so connected to these dragons and still has to kill them. It was cheeky, it was quirky, we still had really high stakes. There were some pretty evil characters in here and I enjoyed it a lot, but not enough to give it more than 3.75 stars. Feed Them Silence is another 5-star. I've been waiting to read this book. I couldn't justify spending $20 on a book that was this small, but oh boy, was this so far up my alley. You might even see this on my top 10 of the year. I loved this so much. The author creates this really incredible juxtaposition between our main character's work life and her home life. So in her work life, she's going into the brain of a wolf in one of the last known wolf packs and creating this really in-depth, empathetic bond with this wolf and seeing things through her eyes and experiencing what she feels and really getting connected and almost feeling a lot like she wants to cross these professional boundaries to be more empathetic, to develop this bond with this wolf in ways that are detrimental to her career and her job. Whereas in her personal life, she's unwilling to do that for her wife, and she's unwilling to reach across this gulf that has formed between her and her wife and be empathetic and make sacrifices for her wife, and instead maintains this really cold and clinical relationship with her wife. And it's just, I think it's so well done, the parallel between her home life and her work life and the way that the empathy is kind of turned upside down. It really did the what does it mean to be human and empathy conversation well. It really did the what do we owe to our partners, what do we owe to our job. It did everything so well. I loved every single page of this. Then I read The Honey Witch, which I gave 3.75 stars. It's a cute cottagecore fantasy about a girl who finds out that she is a honey witch, and her grandmother takes her in and teaches her how to be the honey witch, and the magic is honey based and it's very sweet and cozy, and she's on this magical island and she makes some friends along the way. There's a queer relationship in here. Her curse, because she has this magic, is that she will never be able to be loved or be in love, and so there's obviously something that's coming along with that. I think really the only thing that I didn't love about this is that there's a love curse, and when you have a love curse, things get cheesy. It was not my type of cheese, to be completely honest with you, but it's what I was promised, it's what I was expecting, and it fulfilled the brief. If you're looking for a story about a witch and a love curse, this is that story. I wouldn't classify this maybe as cozy fantasy. It's more cottagecore than it is cozy because there are dark things that happen, there are stakes, people do die, but it does have those cozy cottagecore moments in it as well. Okay, and then wrapping up May, the last book I read was Come Closer by Sarah Gran. This is my second Sarah Gran. I read The Book, The Most Precious Substance. I loved that. I loved this as well. This was 5 stars. I just thought this was really, really well done. So we have this quiz, are you possessed by a demon, that our main character finds as she is slowly becoming possessed by a demon. I feel like this could very easily have just been kind of like a silly, over-the-top or straight horror, scary or funny or both possession story. It's a lot more than that. As our main character is desperately trying to figure out if she is possessed or not and becoming more and more aware that that is the likely possibility, she also is trying to get all these people in her life to help her, and it's not clear if they won't help her because they're also being influenced by this demon or because she's actually just mentally ill and thinks that she's possessed. Because we have this, especially there's this conversation with this therapist. She's explaining everything to him and saying, oh, like I'm not acting like myself, I'm doing these things that I wouldn't otherwise do, and the therapist is like, well, it sounds like you're just getting older and you're growing and you're changing in your hobbies and you're changing in your relationships and you're sticking up for yourself more, like maybe that's a good thing. It was just interesting, like thinking about, especially in today's society with doctors not believing people, if you were actually possessed by a demon and you went to your therapist and you were like, hey, I think I'm possessed by a demon, what would they say about that? Just very interesting conversations going on in this. It really respects your time. It was nice and short. Anytime there's like dream scariness, I get just way too scared. Bad things happening in dreams just really, really works for me. So I really, really enjoyed this. Okay, moving on to June, I read A Botanical Daughter and I didn't like it. I gave this 2 stars. We were following 2 botanists. One of them is obsessed with exotic plants. The other one is obsessed with taxidermy. They are 2 gentlemen who are living in this botanical garden conservatory situation, and they encounter this creepy, strange fungus, and they decide to grow this fungus in a human substrate and create this creature out of plants and fungi. And she is incredible. It's a Frankenstein type story. We also have this girl from the village who gets wrapped up in this. But it really kind of went off the rails for me. We ended up with a sex scene with the plant girl, which was unexpected. I wasn't expecting it to be graphic in the way that it was. I think if there was like a nice love story between the plant girl and this other character, I would have found a way to be on board with that, but it just went off the rails. I'm not gonna tell you any more than that. If you wanna find out, read the book and then come back here and we need to have a conversation about this, because I'm dying to talk to somebody who also read that scene, because, you know, I read this book. I've seen some weird stuff happen in books, but this felt different in some way. I don't think there's anything wrong with this book. It just really was not to my taste. And I don't really know how to recommend it to anyone, because it's giving like cottage core, but also toxic relationship, but also people who are queer trying to fight against this time period, and also Frankenstein science fiction and jealousy and professional rivalry, the weird stuff that I already explained to you that I'm not gonna say again, and people's motivations seem to change very quickly. I don't know, it just, there was a lot of weird stuff going on in here, and it's not for me. Maybe it'll be for you though. What I do recommend you read is In the Company of Witches. This is such a cute little cozy fantasy. I was scared away because it's mass market paperback, and I was like, I thought I was too good for it, okay? I thought I was too good for it. I was like, you know, it's too popular. It's like a cozy mystery fantasy situation. I'm not gonna like it. I don't tend to like these types of books. I'm not too good for it. I gave it 4.25 stars. I loved it. It was really incredibly well written. The plot was fantastic. We're following this little family. They're all witches. Our main character, something really tragic has happened to them, and they are working through that in an intentional way. It's a huge plot point in the story, and she's really struggling with this grief and this situation, and there's parallels to the magic of it all. We're also trying to solve a mystery and a murder, and it remains incredibly cozy and heartfelt, and there are tense family dynamics in here, and obviously there's like a whole plot with this murder mystery that's happening. It just still feels really real and grounded in reality, and really focused on walking us as readers through some important topics that we can apply to our lives, but all the while being extremely entertaining and cozy and kind of holding our hands through it and giving us a warm cup of tea. So I really, really enjoyed this. I also read Goddess of the River, which I am featuring in a vlog that's going to come out after this video, so I'm not going to tell you about it now. I promise I will tell you all about it in that video, and I'll recap it in the month recap once that video comes out, but I just wanted to let you know I have read it, and I will let you know what I thought about it later. The last thing I read was The Girl Who Kept the Castle. I talked about this a little bit in the mid-year freakout tag because the compost dragon in here is adorable, but we're following our main character and the Wizard West, who has just died. The book opens with our main character. She's a young girl. I think she's about 12. She's the daughter of the groundskeeper of this wizard's castle, but she ends up having to be the one to tell him that he is dead because he doesn't know that he's dead. And then we're trying to find his successor, and we're doing this whole competition, and it's also all about this magic, and there's larger plot points with this whole kingdom being at stake, and there's also so many cute little animal companions who turn out to be more than we think they are. It's really quirky and cozy and feels very much like a Studio Ghibli movie. I really think if you're a Studio Ghibli fan, you need to read this book. It is incredible. One of the wizards in here, there are 4 wizards for each of the directions, the cardinal directions. One of them is named Ghibli as a little nod to that, and I think it really just fits in with the whole vibe. I absolutely love this. It's one of my favorite cozy fantasies I have ever read, and I gave it 5 stars. And that is everything that we need to cover since the last time we spoke. I would love to know what you've been reading over the past couple of months. I really read so many books in May, and then I only read 4 things in June. I did finish a book on July 1st, so I almost completed 5 things. My reading has really just been all over the place. 12 books in one month, 4 books in another month. I don't know what's gonna happen in July. I picked 10 things to read in my TBR on Tuesday. We'll see if I end up being able to read all of those. I think the TBR is gonna help me actually read more, because I think this month I was really struggling to figure out what to pick up next. I think having a smaller group of things to choose from is going to help me to increase my reading. So what I would love to hear from you: A, what have you been reading recently? Have you been loving things? Have you been hating things? And B, do you have any recommendations to share with me? Because I'm always looking for more recommendations of things that I should pick up. I'm trying to get through as much of my physical TBR as I can before we leave in November, so I would love to get some excitement behind reading some things that I have on here, if you would be so kind. Obviously, I also want to know in the comments if you've read into the things that we talked about today. If you have different opinions or similar opinions, let's have a chat in the comments. And that's it. I will see you on Sunday for the first summer ween vlogs. I'm going to try to post them all at 11 a.m. Eastern, but we'll see how that goes as the readathon continues. Okay, happy reading. Bye, friends.